What's up, everyone? So before I even start this video, one thing I want to make abundantly clear is that I think it's an absolute travesty that we have these devs who are going to federal prison for creating privacy software, essentially. That's it. Now, that said, I've seen some horrific cases that are like this, a lot of them. So for me, it's not as much of a shock as it is for all the rest of the people who are like, I can't believe this is happening. This is what the federal government has done for decades. So to me, it's not surprising. Now, the only thing that remains to be up for debate in this discussion really is how to go about actually helping them realistically. And I think that the methodologies that have been presented by the overwhelming majority are just a complete failure, totally and completely. And an example of that is a petition that's circulating on change.org asking Trump to pardon the Samourai devs. And the actual problem with that is you can't simultaneously argue that financial privacy tools are necessary to resist state surveillance while voluntarily submitting your name to a public database that prosecutors, law enforcement, and corporate intelligence can actually use to scrape, get information on. The petition platform itself becomes a target if you believe anonymity is a necessary protection against technocratic surveillance. Signed with your real credentials, it makes you a hypocrite. If you sign with a pseudonym, you've just diluted the petition's already negligible weight that it has. Now, Rodriguez got 5 years plus $250,000 fine. Hill got 4 years plus $250,000 fine. Why did they get the fine? Because the government likes to make money. Why did they get the time? Because the government likes to make money. They were both charged with unlicensed money transmission for building a Bitcoin wallet that essentially just prioritized financial privacy. For me, when I look at that charge alone, it's an oxymoron in itself, kind of like an honest politician or square marble. Unlicensed money transaction is moronic as a charge itself. And you can't license illegal activities, right? Like you can't get a license to commit armed robbery, for example, or there's no license to commit tax fraud. And I know, like, people will be like, oh, well, you can, like, these people can pay extra money. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, can you actually get a license to do something completely illegal? And the answer to that is no, you can't. Because all of those things are crimes, right? Money laundering, whatever. All those things are crimes. Licenses exist for activities that are already legal, but require the state's permission, which is what a child does. A child asks for permission. Only children ask for permission. Now, this is, in my opinion, some of the obvious evidence that we absolutely live in a nanny state. We already all know that we live in a surveillance state, but it gets even worse than that. Basically, driving, for example, is legal, but you need a license. Building a house is legal, but you need permits. The license is the state inserting itself as a gatekeeper for something you're otherwise allowed to do in order to make money or build a house or whatever. Like, to do a thing, right? Charging someone with unlicensed money transmission admits the activity itself is legal. They just didn't ask for permission to actually do it by the nanny state, and that's the real reason they got in trouble. Rodriguez reports to prison December 19th, and before we get into the petition any further, like, I'm a firm believer that everyone is entitled to their own opinions. I had tons of people who disagreed with me. I realized that by me making this video, even though I disagree with it, there are some people who go sign it because I made this video. And I'm not against you personally going and signing this petition. Doesn't really affect me. As a matter of fact, I'm not even really against the petition in an ideological sense or the idea of petitions. I've seen a lot of guys in prison think that they're going to get out of prison and end up being let down because it never actually happened. And it's one of the cruelest things that you could actually see. It's like someone having a dog in a cage, right? And going to like open the door and then closing it real quick on them and then laughing about it, because that's exactly what happens when things like this happen. The people in the system do laugh about it. And when I first saw this is kind of how I saw that in general, because I've seen guys in prison actually go through this. And I also want to be clear, this wasn't something like I just disagreed fundamentally with a person. And I actually went and I wrote Rodriguez. I couldn't really find Hill's X account, but I wrote Rodriguez and I gave him a ton of advice on this. But I did. I wrote him and I told him about what he should do, how he should prepare to go into prison, what kind of things he should do, and some uncomfortable truths about it. That was my contribution to him actually preparing to go and do this time. Now, after thinking about it and having people directly ask my specific opinion on this, I think I've come to the actual conclusion, honestly, that the petition itself is performative theater that really asks you to compromise kind of the exact principles that Rodriguez and Hill are being prosecuted for defending. And again, I know they'll push back on this, and that's fine, but federal prosecutors don't care about petition signatures. They just don't. Like, know this. Like, they care about conviction rates. They care about being able to say that they won X amount of cases and that they protected the public, which is always the nonsense they tout, by putting away the bad guys, which is another phrase they love to use. This is exactly how it's packaged and sold to people, and I know it because I watched the DOJ make public announcements about me. That's when people are like, oh, look, he's supposed to be an OPSEC guy, and he puts his face out there. It's like, well, there's a difference between operational security and privacy. And that's the people who say that basically show that they have no concept of that. My privacy pretty much went out the door the day the DOJ doxed me and, put in my thing, oh, this is where he's from. So that's it. And once I got to that point where I'm like, my whole life I've been behind the scenes, now I'm not. Okay, well, now I'm not going to be. And now I can say whatever I want. And that's why we're here right now. So thank you for being a part of that and listening to me complain and make kind of crazy points that no one else really, I've seen, no one else has these points. And maybe I am just nuts. But how many campaigning politicians have you actually seen that constantly shill, for example, going back to our thing, being in law enforcement or being a PA or an AUSA? They care about things like case law and precedent and whether they can secure a conviction. And they'll basically judge their ability to prosecute someone based on that. And that's because the assistant United States attorney one day wants to be a United States attorney, not just an assistant United States attorney. And the United States attorney one day wants to be a senator, right? Like, the DOJ charged Rodriguez and Hill under 18 USA 1960, plus gave them conspiracy counts for good measure, as they always do. I've said before on this channel many times that conspiracy charge itself is just a catch-all. If everything else fails, they could be like, oh, it's conspiracy, because it's just an agreement to do something. And they never have an issue making that case. And even if they did, they would just violate the law, because that's what they do. Anyways, a petition with 1,500 signatures at the time of me rambling in front of this camera, or 150 million signatures, changes nothing fundamentally about the legal elements that they actually need to prove. And I couldn't find a single verified example of a change.org petition by itself resulting in a presidential pardon. Not one. And I looked. Like, I saw people trying to make political appeals when, by and large, it's a largely a judicial process, the conviction of him. And, like, it could be argued that the pardoning or the clemency is not. I would argue this year alone, going back and forth between judicial and political, we've really seen how little federal judges fear or care even about things like directives from the President of the United States. They overrule them. Like, I mean, they're not supposed to be able to, but it's a side issue. The real question here is, what actually helps? Money for legal appeals matter because competent federal defense attorneys can cost $500, $800 an hour. And in these cases, those kind of things can drag on for years. Like, it's insane. Like, things like technical contributions to wallet implementations that don't rely on custodial models or things like centralized infrastructure, those matter too. Documentation of prosecutorial overreach, that can be actually cited in briefs or appeals, that matters. Building alternative systems that route around state control are some of the things that really matter here. A petition asking privacy advocates to dox themselves does none of these things. You know what it does do? It generates headlines. It creates a surveillance artifact. Rodriguez and Hill need material support and technical resilience, right? Instead, the internet offers them symbolic gestures and virtue signaling that compromise the people who claim to support them, which is insane. How is it that I can see this contradiction? And the fake name strategy doesn't even work. Give, Send, Go got hacked twice in 2022. The second breach leaked every donor in the platform's history, 5 gigs of data, including 1,400 unredacted passports and driver's licenses. Change.org lets petition creators download your name, your city, postal zip code, even if you've selected it to be a private signature. And academic researchers have scraped 2,000 petitions worth of data. Both platforms hand information over to law enforcement when requested. And keep in mind, these guys, they're getting prosecuted for making privacy tools. So, you don't think that people who are advocating for privacy, that might be a good lead for the feds? Who are all these people? What are they doing? The site logs your IP address. They track when you click email confirmation links. They use these trackable links that they're posting on X for everyone to click and use. They're using temp mail, and that really doesn't protect you when both platforms require email confirmation to count your signature and log all of the metadata that's involved in all those interactions. So you either sign with real credentials and create that permanent surveillance record, or you sign with fake credentials and contribute to a worthless petition full of fraudulent signatures. But again, either way, you've accomplished nothing except making yourself feel better. When you actually sign the petition, Change.org offers a donation link that looks like it supports the cause. And the wording makes it sound like your money actually helps Rodriguez and Hill directly, but it doesn't. Change.org actually keeps 100% of that money for promotions on their website and email communications, meaning their own advertising budget. None of it goes to the petition creator. None of it goes to legal defense. Change.org is profiting off of Rodriguez and Hill's persecution while contributing nothing to their actual defense. And I would argue that the people that are advocating for that are in the wrong. Now, contrast that with the actual deadline itself, right? This was implemented. It being a factor alone really exposes the entire operation as crisis theater. Now, the petition was launched November 11th, and he'll get sentenced November 19th, and now you're supposed to believe that signatures collected between mid-November and mid-December will somehow move a pardon decision that requires a ridiculous amount of bureaucracy. Stuff like White House counsel review, lawyers reading it, and coordination with the DOJ. If you ever dealt with the feds at all, nothing happens like that, right? It takes you longer to get your tax return every year. So, it's insane to even push a deadline unless... Do you see what I'm saying? Presidential pardons don't operate on things like countdown timers, nor do they like magically get handed out, even in cases where a lot of people think they should be, or when they actually should be. And this is the point, right? Like, they cite in the petition Ross Ulbricht's pardon. And like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, it took libertarian activists years, coalition building and direct lobbying and strategic political pressure before Trump actually acted January of 2025. And that campaign involved targeted outreach to Trump's inner circle, coordination with multiple advocacy organizations, and stuff like sustained visibility across election cycles, not 30 days. And the Samourai petition launched after Hill and Rodriguez already pled guilty in July 2025 is just moronic. Like, you can't speed run federal clemency with change.org. Like, it's just not going to happen. That and manufactured urgency, the feds don't care about. And politicians, we'll get into that in a minute, but the entire thing really tells me that the people making these moves have just done absolutely zero research into their actual effectiveness, which in turn makes me question the point of it altogether, along with like the motives of the people who are promoting it and pushing it. The deadline itself is really operationally meaningless. Whether they report to prison on December 19th or January 2nd has really zero bearing on when Trump's pardon attorney reviews clemency applications or when political advisors decide which cases advance administration priorities, which is the one they're going to prioritize. Pardons can happen before prison, during incarceration, or even after release. The deadline creates this false pressure to try and drive petition signatures. It's not actually a legal strategy. And this trains people to treat resistance as consumer behavior, right? The sign now, the limited time, sign now before the limited time offer expires, share before the deadline. The same psychological manipulation used to sell concert tickets and used cars. They're now applying to federal prosecutions because nobody can be bothered to do any research whatsoever because thinking hard. Like, if you're going to go against an adversary, it's anyone besides a complete moron, you better do some research. You need to know your adversary. If you don't know your adversary, you have no business trying to fight them. Like, you don't organize clemency campaigns in the gap between sentencing and surrender. It's moronic. That infrastructure needs to exist before the actual arrest, if possible. But if not, directly after that. The petition deadline is like trying to capitalize on headlines, and it teaches the wrong lesson. Future developers will see this and see the panic-driven signature collection that exists behind it and think like, oh, that's how you respond to federal prosecution. And it just isn't. Like, you respond by never being in a position to need the pardon to begin with. You do this by knowing your enemy, by knowing that people will put you in prison for years for promoting financial privacy, and knowing what you'll do in that case if it happens. And more importantly, having that laid out with others. And like, the only way this happens is if you don't understand the system. That's it. This is why so many people are outraged and asking, like, how could this happen? How could this be? This is the system that exists. It's not new. Every time I see that question asked, it's just confirmation that the person saying it has no clue how the system actually works. And it's not that person's fault. They're surrounded by propaganda. Go watch CSI. Every criminal gets caught. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. Or they confess, they break down. It's absolute insanity. And in the real world, the biggest criminals, they don't get arrested. They don't have to. What they do, they write laws. That's what and they exempt themselves from those laws. Like, presidential pardons are political instruments. They're not emergency escape valves, right? Like, Trump pardoned Ross because it served multiple political objectives in one shot. It appealed to libertarians, right? It demonstrated that there was going to be some criminal justice reform, gave him some credentials in that area, generated media attention around the controversial clemency decision, and it cost him nothing. Whether he pardons Rodriguez and Hill depends on whether their case advances similar goals, not whether a petition hits a certain signature threshold before they report to prison or if it's right or wrong. And at the end of the day, he's a lame duck president, so he's not running for another term. So there's no motive to do it. But even if there was, there's not enough time. Like, it's crazy. Like, that's what people really don't get. And again, like, that's because your average person, which, by the way, is me and you and everybody else who's not a member of, like, the God status political class, we're all the same, right? Like when they write laws, they exempt themselves from those laws. Like I said earlier, if you're not one of them and have no specific use to them, they don't care. You're irrelevant. And that's because they're all parasites that feed on all of us continually. Nobody defending this position has mentioned appeals. Isn't that crazy? Like, Rodriguez and Hill have 14 days from sentencing to file notice of appeal. Like, they can challenge the suppressed FinCEN evidence. Prosecutors admitted in April of 2025 that they had hid exculpatory evidence on information showing FinCEN told the DOJ 6 months before the indictment that Samourai didn't actually need a money transmission license. And that's what they call a Brady violation. It's when they hide information that can benefit you as the defendant. And Second Circuit judges can absolutely review that, and petition signatures can't. Now, I remember seeing, for example, some of my homeboys when they would go to rec, like they would go to walk around the track or whatever in federal prison, and they would go and work out together, basically. And they would ask, hey, like, do you want to come? And I would tell them, like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm going to go to the most dangerous part of the prison. And they would always look at me like I was crazy. And it's not the most dangerous part of the prison for inmates or convicts. There's a difference between the two. But for the actual feds and the staff that exist in the prison, like, the law library is by far the most dangerous place in a prison for everyone that seeks to oppress and control you. And if you want to be a threat, get educated. If you want to be dangerous to the state and have some kind of power, learn. It's the most dangerous thing you can do. And my work freed real people from real federal sentences using Title 18 USC 3582 C1A, which basically is compassionate release motions that federal judges actually grant. But I wanted to make this video because petitions are not a way to do that. And when the next one comes, I want people having some semblance of understanding of why it's useless and being able to put their energy into things that actually matter, right? Like, future privacy developers watching this should learn something from this entire situation. That's why I'm making this video. Some people will use your prosecution for their own social capital. They'll attack anyone doing things like cost-benefit analysis of tactics because the actual analysis itself threatens the entire performance that they're trying to put on. They'll make your case about them rather than about you. And Rodriguez and Hill report to prison because they built privacy tools that the state essentially decided to capitalize on and criminalize so they could have an example, right? Like, and then people that are out there get Twitter engagement and likes by acting like crusaders, when in reality, they couldn't litigate their way out of a speeding ticket, much less do anything real for anyone else. Now, December 19 arrives. Rodriguez reports to federal prison. No pardon's going to have materialized. Petition defenders will say, oh, we tried, that they raised awareness through their useless Twitter activism, and then at the end of the day, they'll say that they did something and they'll virtue signal their asses off about it. And that narrative protects them from accountability for promoting false hope with a manufactured deadline. Meanwhile, he gained people who will think he's not a scumbag, while at the same time, those developers, the guys who actually faced the case, will be walking into a United States federal prison, and their first stop will be solitary, as is everyone's typically after R&D or receiving in discharge now post-COVID. It'll be a massive shock to them, and most likely it'll mess with their head a little bit. While for the next few months or weeks, Bozo every once in a while will drop a hashtag, a free Samourai hashtag, while he uses their situation. He'll forget about them entirely up until a month before their actual release, when he'll promptly contact them after 4 or 5 years and try acting like he was there the whole time. And this is a normal thing that people go through in prison if they have any notoriety. The pattern really trains people, again, to accept this nonsensical performative activism as sufficient responses to state prosecution and persecution. And as long as you did something, you participated in something, you said something, you signed something, you supported something, you fulfilled an obligation, and now you can brag about how you did that and what you did. And it's so difficult to tell people to go and sign this. They get monetized off of it. And yeah, you can argue the same thing about me. Like, I'm making this video, and it's like, well, Sam, like, you're making a video, you're monetized, you're talking about it. I am, but I'm actually giving real solutions, not false hope. And that's the difference, right? For them, actual effectiveness doesn't matter. Real work doesn't matter because they don't do it. They didn't even Google this. I can tell you for a fact because they're advocating for it. The appearance of effort to them matters. The state doesn't need to stop you, in this case, from organizing if organizing produces no results. The state has no fear of you if you're harmless because you have an IQ of a cold room here in Vermont on a winter's day. In that case, you're too stupid to be an adversary. And that's how I see it. That's how they see it. Like drooling on yourself as you retweet signed a petition with tracked URLs and drop hashtags. It's all just like super pathetic and sad to see. But the petition deadline operates as a pressure release valve. People who are angry about stuff like Rodriguez and Hill's prosecution, they get to channel that anger into signing this form that creates zero leverage over clemency decisions. But they feel like they help. Then the anger dissipates, right? But nothing actually changes. And if nothing else, you've actually aided the state. You've helped them by calming down the sheeple who are upset. And the cycle repeats for the next prosecution, right? Another privacy developer or whatever gets arrested. Another petition gets launched. Another artificial urgency gets created. And then in turn, someone else gets monetized on Twitter. Another round of social pressure to sign, share, support, all for fake concern. Another failure when the petition accomplishes absolutely nothing material. Or even just the basic part of asking in AI, what are the odds that this will actually work? And it's just crazy that they're too lazy to even do that. So one of two types of people would think the petition strategy actually works. First, people who genuinely don't understand how federal prosecutions and presidential clemency or pardons actually work. And I have absolute sympathy for these people. Like, they're just outraged, right? Because they see something wrong. They see 1/1,000,000th of the level of actual injustice that really exists in that system, right? They see petitions. They see signatures. They think that democracy works like high school student council, where votes change outcomes. And these are people that, by and large, for the most part, have good hearts, right? They're just misled. They just don't understand the reality of the situation. And a lot of times, unfortunately, most people don't until they actually go through it. And by then, it's too late. And that's kind of the paradox, if you will. Second, people who understand this perfectly well, that it won't work, and they recognize it generates social media engagement. They build their personal brand based off of it. They position themselves as community leaders during things like this crisis. And the first group is ignorant and manipulated, and or just good-willed and not knowing and hasn't actually done anything to be put in that position. And when I say that, I don't mean anything illegal, because at the end of the day, I don't think what the Samourai devs did is illegal, and the government admitted that in their own briefs or whatever. So the second group is cynical, though. They're crude and they're crass, and neither group really is helping Rodriguez and Hill. But that said, the first group at least tries. At least they're honest about it, and they're not doing it strictly to get something in return. And that I have admiration for. But at the same time, like, the reason I'm making this video is to educate them on the right things to do. And I understand one could point to me and say, well, how are you helping, Sam? All you're doing is complaining and calling people out, and you'd be right about that. But at least what I'm doing has a chance to break the cycle and educate some people, to get people to try and fact check instead of just blindly believing in nonsense. I wrote my book not for money, but to hit the system where it really hurts, to enable individuals to be able to fight for their own freedom instead of being used by some leech lawyer for $20K or whatever. They could buy my book for $20, and no one's going to argue harder for your freedom than you or your family, right? There's people that actually care about you and love you. So even if, like, a federal inmate or convict was kept in their cell 24/7 with no rec, no law library access, which is illegal, but they do it anyways, and that's the point. Like, they do whatever they want. They're like, oh, that's against the law. You can't do that. I call it "you can't do that" isms, and it's reserved for people who don't know enough about the system. And that's what they'll say. You can't do that. Like, oh, okay. It's like a federal judge will say, I sentence someone, says this person should go to this prison in this state. And then the BOP says, hey, you're going to turn yourself in at this prison. You get to the prison, and you're like, oh, the judge said I'm supposed to go to this state, or I'm supposed to be in this security level. And the BOP goes, oh, yeah? Where's the judge? Oh, he's not here? No. They do whatever they want. And that's the point. Now, again, I don't care if I get no likes, no comments on this video. It's irrelevant to me at the end of the day. If one person watches this and can see these leeches for what they are, these sharks that use these crises to virtue signal by using useless methodologies, and next time someone says, hey, this is nonsense, I'm fine with that. That's awesome. Because we need to stop being ineffectual. We need to stop being useless. My point with all of it is when you put in work, it shows. And when you don't, it shows to people who have. So here's what actually matters legally right now. The Brady violation is basically the only thing that could possibly get their convictions overturned. Prosecutors admitted in April of 2025 that they hid evidence from the defense for over a year. And FinCEN told the DOJ in October of 2023 that Samourai wallet didn't actually need a money transmitter license. 6 months later, in April of 2024, the DOJ arrested Rodriguez and Hill and charged them both with operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. Now, obviously, the government knew the regulatory agency responsible for money transmitter licensing said that they didn't need one and charged them anyway. And that's how the feds works. Like, the prosecutors hid that fact until the defense attorneys basically dragged it out of them by filing a specific Brady request asking for that type of evidence very specifically. And that's absolutely textbook prosecutorial misconduct. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals can review it, and federal judges have definitely reversed convictions for less egregious violations. The petition can't do anything about this, which is why it's useless. Appellate briefs documenting the actual timeline, FinCEN's position, and the DOJ's deliberate suppression of the exculpatory evidence that existed, those things are what matters. Signatures, courts don't care about that. If you actually want to help Rodriguez and Hill, pressure really needs to be the focus, and it needs to focus on those legal appeals, and it means doing actual legal research, not doing fake virtue signaling on Twitter. And it doesn't mean begging parasitic politicians for clemency fantasies with manufactured deadlines. And keep in mind, like, I don't care about Trump. I don't care who's president. It's a Democrat, Republican. I think it's both nonsense. So I don't really think it matters at the end of the day who's in. I just think begging politicians in general is not a good methodology for operating in the real world, because they are parasites. Rodriguez's 5 years, good time, means 4.25 years served, and Hill's 4 years minus 15% means 3.4 years served. And the petition isn't playing some long game. It's playing no game at all, aside from virtue signaling. So Rodriguez and Hill plead guilty because the federal system is designed to extract guilty pleas under duress. They spent 18 months under house arrest. They cut them off from funds that they actually earned from Samourai, watching the DOJ basically prepare for trial with unlimited resources. Now, mind you, they're lucky, okay? Because many people are actually held in horrific county jails with no resources. Federal conviction rates at trial are like 98%, even with Brady violations, even with FinCEN's pre-indictment assessment. Fighting at trial basically meant gambling on this marginal 2% chance or less, realistically, while spending more years in legal limbo. And if they lost, judges would make martyrs out of them, make examples out of them. They'd pose longer sentences as punishment for not pleading. And that calculation basically has nothing to do with actual guilt. It's strictly making an example of someone. The system manufactures guilty pleas by making the alternative absolutely unendurable for anyone. I haven't even gotten to like upward departures yet that exist that increase sentence length. And we're not going to, because it's like a whole other thing. But this is how a federal prosecution actually works across all cases. The average person commits 3 felonies a day, according to civil liberties attorney Harvey Silvergate, because federal criminal code is so vast and vague that compliance is literally impossible. Wire fraud statutes are so broad that forwarding a work email for personal use technically qualifies. Lying to a federal agent, even if you're not under oath, and even if the lie is about something that isn't even itself a crime, is a felony under 18 U.S.C. 1001. Conspiracy charges require no actual crime to be completed, just an agreement and one overt act, which can be as minor as making a phone call or sending an email. Which is why anyone who says so-and-so is a criminal, they deserve it, is incredibly ignorant to the fact that they too are a criminal. They are a felon whenever the feds decide they are. 20,000 pages of new federal law gets drafted every 2 years, about, give or take. Nobody knows what all the laws are. Not lawyers who studied for 7 years, not the politicians, half of them don't even read it, not the paralegals who have to go through it to do legal research, not the federal judges, and definitely not us, the peasant class who the laws are actually written for. The law is unknowable by design because an unknowable law gives prosecutors unlimited discretion in who to actually charge, how to charge them. It allows them to target any and all opposition to any issues they might have and eliminate that person. Rodriguez and Hill's pleas weren't actual admissions that they knowingly broke the law. It was recognition that the DOJ would just destroy them financially, mentally, whether they were guilty or not, that they would be put in a prison with a level of violence that many people can't even imagine is possible, with individuals that are like true psychopaths and make Dexter, in a lot of cases, look like a Boy Scout. Like, there are people there that are so astute at manipulation and exploitation that they make Machiavelli look like a kid lying for the first time. It's a version of hell on earth that most people are lucky enough they don't have to actually know, they don't have to live in. And if they ever call you a ticket and you have half a brain, and you do any research whatsoever, you're going to do the same thing they did. You're going to plead out. And the lessons for developers here is really simple. Like, if you build privacy tools that do things like threaten state surveillance, like, you can't be someone the FBI can arrest. Like, Rodriguez and Hill use their real names. They maintain public presences at things like Bitcoin conferences and operated from U.S. jurisdiction. And that is what made them targets. Like, they were people that could be made an example of. They completely misunderstood their enemy. They didn't know the level of depravity that actually exists in the federal system. And now they're learning. And this is the reality of it. And it's unfortunate. I take no comfort at all in saying that because I was them at one point. But I actually, like, what I did, I knowingly did. I knowingly broke the law. I don't think these guys did by a long shot. But the next generation of privacy tool developers really needs to learn from these guys' prosecution, right? Like anonymous development, stuff like infrastructure in non-extradition jurisdictions, no public conferences or stuff like identifiable leadership, and just forget about these centralized points of failure that are literally the Achilles heels that the system wants you to be a part of. Like the DOJ prosecuted developers of a non-custodial wallet that never held users' funds because it enabled financial privacy. That's it. That's what happened. Like, I made a whole video about the claim that they would no longer target people for crypto. And I said, this is a lie. Guess what? It was a lie. I was right because we're fodder for the system. That prosecution established a certain precedent. Now, even though we didn't actually experience it, I can guarantee you privacy tool developers in the future are now going to think twice. Like, they're potential targets for the same kind of nonsensical legal theory. And prosecutors decide retroactively what counts as a crime. And pretending you're different from Rodriguez and Hill because you're more careful or more compliant, which is even worse, it just means you totally misunderstand the actual system that exists, how federal overcriminalization actually works. You don't get to decide if you're a criminal. Prosecutors decide that. Your only protection is being someone that they can't find or being one of the elites that writes the laws and, in turn, exempts yourself from them, which is why they can do stuff like insider trading and they're not monitoring DeRisa, which is a whole different video that I did. But concrete help looks like stuff like sending money directly to Rodriguez and Hill as federal inmates. I don't advise using websites. I don't advise using third parties or defense funds or any of that crap. And it sounds kind of counter to my typical points, but the Bureau of Prisons, which is federal prisons, accept money orders sent to inmates. So essentially, you can buy a money order with cash, meaning no real name required or tracking. John Monero, and the inmate receives it and gets to control exactly how it gets used instead of you having to trust someone else, some website, someone on third party, one of his family members. And it's rough to talk about, and I get that. But like one of the points I brought up to Rodriguez in my DM was like, hey man, I suggest you look at the divorce rates. Like it's a legitimate threat factor. I don't know anything about his marriage. I'm not saying he has a bad marriage or a good marriage. I'm saying that legitimately the divorce rate is like insane. From what I saw, it's 99%. It's super small minority that actually make it through. Very few women. His wife could be one of those. I hope she is. But like at the end of the day, my point is, if she's not, and in a month she's like, screw this guy, like what happens then? So my whole, and again, no disrespect. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm saying that legitimately, if you're going to send someone money, like he created the tool, send him the money. Send it directly to him, and you could do it much more anonymously. There's no tracked URLs this way. There's no, we're saving the data for forever, and like none of that actually exists. You have to keep in mind, a lot of these websites that do this charitable organization, they're taking percentages. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. And then people are like, well, if you send him money, what's he going to do? He's going to buy commissary? He can only get commissary? No, it's not the case at all. Federal inmates can file what's called a BP 199 for withdrawals to outside entities. What's that mean? It means Rodriguez and Hill themselves get to decide to send money to family members, to pay legal bills, to cover commissary costs, or anything else they need. They can literally go in, fill out this form, and have a check sent to anyone, institution, person, whatever they want. And sending funds through third-party websites, again, it creates donation records, email trails, and attribution. Sending money orders directly to inmates through the Bureau of Prisons basically bypasses all of that while giving them the maximum flexibility over how those funds actually are used. And these guys, they made a non-custodial wallet for you. Give them back in that same way, that same kind of autonomy, by letting them make the choice of what to do with the money. And in turn, disallow anyone else to make money off of it, right? Now, those guys who go out tomorrow and say, hey, Sam, we don't want that. We want it to go to this website, or we want it to go to this family member. Cool. Like, that's their ability. That's irrelevant to me, though. My point that I'm saying is, like, you can give people the autonomy and you can give to them directly. And aside from that, let's say you don't want to send money, right? The Bureau of Prisons, I think still, you definitely want to check into it before you do it, but like, you can send up to 3 books at a time. I recommend 1 book at a time, but you can send in a book, you order it on Amazon, and you have it delivered to them, right? So, like, how do you actually get that info? Well, first off, you start off going to the BOP's website, okay? So here you can see this is the BOP's website. We'll put in my name, right? So put it in Sam Bent, hit search, give it a minute, boom, pops up. We can see all my info. Obviously, I'm no longer in federal prison, but now we can take this info. If I was in federal prison, it would say, oh, this is where he is. And then like, let's say it says I'm in Berlin. We could take that information, go to the location up top, go to the list, click on Berlin, scroll down, and now you can see we have the actual address for the prison, and we just put in my name and my number, which we got from the search. It's super easy. This is how you send mail, basically. And if you want to help Rodriguez and Hill, again, send the money orders. If you want to help future developers avoid similar fates, build anonymously in a jurisdiction that the feds can't reach. And one last thing I want to mention too, aside from all that stuff, you can also send them pictures. Make sure they're non-nude pictures. Also, same thing for the books. Don't send like the 48 Laws of Power or the Art of War, anything like that. Feds don't like that. Also, don't send anything with maps in it. They also don't like that. And send it through Amazon or directly from a publisher, and it'll typically, you won't have an issue. The only other hard rule is no hardcover books. Has to be softcover. And those are like the main rules. But the other thing is, like, there's a service called Free Prints. So there's stuff these guys like. Maybe they want pictures of, like, I don't know, their wallet or whatever, Bitcoin, I don't know. But stuff you think they'll like, you could take pictures of And you can send it with a service called Free Prints, which is going to charge you like $1 or $3 to send 20 pictures at a time. Send them no more than 20 pictures. You can send it to them. They'll get the pictures. And that's that. In any case, I wanted to make this video because I thought it was an important topic. And the next time that a petition comes out, virtue signaling in nature, this video will be useful, basically for any further application. Thank you for the time you took to actually watch this entire thing. And stay safe, stay aware if there are adversaries out there. I'll see you in the next video.